Hey everybody! In this video, we are going to make some very inky valentines. These are fun old techniques that we had as split coast tutorials for combining different ink types like 5 years ago. And I realized I don't use them very often, so I'm going to use them today with the Nesting Hearts Infinity dies. I cut myself a little stencil basically with the heart, and I've saved the positive portion of this stencil, and I'll show you this same technique with that. Well, a little variation. So I have this adorable little heart background set up in my MISTI, and I have the card on a sticky mat. This is how I like to keep my cardstock in place. And I'm using unicorn ink to ink up this stamp. I'm going to be layering 3 different inks here, and this pigment ink is just the start of it. Now you'll want really good contact for this technique. I'm using a little pressure tool that a member of our team sent me, my sweet friend Michelle Lupton. And that helps me really make sure all the little hearts are filled in. So I'll stamp this a second time, again, giving it a lot of pressure to make sure that I have a good amount of ink. Because this will be popping out against dye and hybrid inks, I really need to make sure it's very well inked up. Now you'll want to heat set it or let it dry naturally before moving on to the next part, but you can see there that you can see the impression even though it's white on white. So you'll want to leave the mask in place for this next part. It's great because it can also hold it to your work surface, which I love. Now I'm going to take some ultra pink ink and a blending brush. I use my little scraps that I've used for die cutting to sort of test out my colors. This is my favorite color of pink ink that Hero Arts makes. It's like a bubblegummy sort of very bright pink, and I love it. Now, when you are ink blending over the white pigment ink, you'll want the color to be fairly intense. I like to wipe off the extra ink to see how well the pigment ink is popping out, and then I can add more ink if it looks like it's a little bit too pale. And you can see as I go back in with just a little bit more ink, how that really pops that heart pattern out. Now, this will become part of the background. So you'll want it to show up really, really well because we'll be doing another inking over the top of this. So you can just wipe the extra ink off. I wanted to make sure I kind of peeled up a little bit of my mask there. So I wanted to make sure that that was nice and crisp on the edge. Next, I will move on to Azalea ink, which is a beautiful ink that looks a lot like the Pantone color of the year, which is why I'm choosing that for today, because we have a mixed media challenge at Split Coast with the Pantone color, and Azalea is just perfect. So I will be using this card for that challenge as well. Now I have a second MISTI here, my older black Hero Arts MISTI, and I'm putting a very well-loved sticky mat. This is not neglected at all. No one is going to call Sticky Mat Protective Services on me after they see this sticky mat because they know that I'm using it all the time. Now I will position the mask and the cardstock together back onto the sticky mat for this next portion, and I'll go ahead and pop a magnet in there for security. I have this beautiful background stamp that I'll be using for the second portion of this. Now I do want the background stamp to be somewhat straight and also covering the entire opening. So I will pick that up with the lid of my MISTI, and now I will go to the darker ink, which is the Azalea ink, to stamp on top of this. Now this is from the Core ink line. This is a hybrid ink. The Ultra Pink is a dye-based ink that I use to do the ink blending with. And you will be able to see both the pink ink, the Ultra Pink ink, and the little heart background when I stamp this beautiful floral pattern all over it in the Azalea ink. That little bit of darker will add some interest. So I'm inking this up This is a pretty new to me ink pad. So it's nice and juicy and will stamp really, really well. I am using the pressure tool because I'm using masking paper. And so I really want to make sure that I get even pressure and make sure that it stamps all the way to the edge of the masking paper, which might take 1 or 2 times to fill in. But see how you can see the little hearts? And you can see that I have a little bit of ink left at the edge of that heart. So I'm going to go over that shape and look how it just comes right up to the edge perfectly. So now I have both of these patterns captured, and I have a little stripe where I did not cover up the cardstock over on the left. This was actually an accident, but I went ahead and just leaned into this and made it part of the card design. So I'll show you how I did that. I'm all about telling you truth and transparency when it comes to my stamping mistakes. Now you can see a little bit of that pigment ink from outside of the mask where it was stamped on the sticky mat, got picked up onto the stamp. You can use that as another technique, or you can just clean it off. It's up to you. So now here we are pretending that my mistake was on purpose and masking off that section, and I'm going to ink blend it to make it match the heart. And it's going to end up looking really cute, and I sort of wish I had been smart enough to think of it and not just have it happen as a mistake. Now, when I put the tape down, that little daisy design went a little bit past the edge of where I had that mask, so I'm going to reposition my tape, and I'm sort of lining it up on my glass mat so that I can make sure that I get a straight line and not a wonky line. And I will just pick up that little extra bit and color that in so the flowers aren't sticking out past the ink blended portion. And look how cute that looks. It totally looks like I planned it. So let's not tell anybody, shall we? We're just going to move on. Now, hero pearls are a great way to really bump up the glamour factor of a 1-layer card. And so I decided that these would be very classy, very glamorous little Valentines, in addition to having all these inky layers that are so much fun. So I have the white hero pearls. These are super iridescent and shiny, and they level out after you put them down. And this is my little trick for even spacing. I put 2 dots any width apart, then I put a dot in the center, and then I put a dot in between those 2 dots on either side. And this helps you get it as even as you can without being a machine. So it doesn't matter what the distance is that you choose. You just choose a distance, put a dot in the middle, and then put 2 dots in between those 2 dots. And look how even it looks. This is such an easy trick. It works with embellishments. It works with the hero pearls, anything that you're trying to space out, especially if you're as bad at that as I am. I really have a hard time eyeballing things and making them straight or even. So this helps me. This is just a little split the difference technique that works no matter what the distance is that you're splitting. Here I made it about 2 inches every section, but you can do whatever you want. You could do the entire side of the heart and then just keep splitting the difference until you are done. And it really looks like somebody who can eyeball stuff did it, and that's not me. So let me show you what that looks like up close with those little iridescent pearls. So beautiful. I just love the way this looks, and the little side accent is so pretty. You can see the little hearts peeking through the daisies, and I just love the combination of these 2 background stamps. I want you to think about all the bold prints that you have and how you could combine them with this combination of pigment ink and dye inks to get brand new patterns that don't really look like either stamp. They're just made better when you put them together. Now I have the original Misty set up with the same stamp, and I don't need this mask anymore, so I'm going to get rid of it. And I will make a new card with the positive section of the mask that I cut out. So I'm sort of figuring out where this goes so that the stamp will cut it up. But then I realized that the heart that I cut, because I wanted it to go off of the edge of the card initially, that means that it's a little bit big for the card panel that I've chosen, which is 4 by 5 1/4 on purpose. That's how I designed the first one on purpose. But for the second one, I thought, well, why not do it horizontally? So it's 2 cards with very similar techniques, but they're going to end up looking really different because of the use of the positive and the negative, the difference in orientation. And then I'm going to leave one step out of the process just to show you how that works. So you'll just want to put the positive mask down on your cardstock. I like to secure the sticky mat with a magnet. And then we'll go through at least the first part of the process again. This time we'll be stamping outside the heart with the little white heart background with the white pigment ink to create the pattern in the background and leave an opening where the positive mask is. So again, I will ink this up twice, use the pressure tool to make sure that I really got solid little hearts. And then that is all good. Now on this one, I'm going to do a third one. There's a little bit more kind of edge area that needs to be filled in with this one. So I want to make sure, because there's more of the pattern, I want to make sure that that's really, really inked well. So let me get this out of here and we will proceed on to the second step. Now you'll want to clean the pigment ink off of your stamps when you're done stamping, even if you don't completely clean it like you would when you're getting ready to put it away. Do get that pigment ink at least off the surface of the stamp. It's impossible basically to ruin a vulcanized rubber stamp, but I will tell you that there are things you can do that make them harder to clean. And one of the things is letting that pigment ink dry on there. So I like to at least do a cursory cleaning before I move on with the rest of my card. So now I will move the sticky mat into the MISTI that has the little floral background on it. And I'll figure out where this needs to go to get stamped all over with that same pattern. And remember, don't remove your mask yet. When that is dry, now remember, it'll be dry in the background. I happen to heat set mine, but the masking paper is a little less porous. And so you might pick up some white ink onto your stamp when you stamp over that. So if that's the case, just make sure that you clean your stamp before stamping it a second time to get a clean image. So here I'll ink it up again. I'm using the Azalea. So far the process is identical. The step that I left out was the ink blending. So I didn't ink blend the ultra pink all over the stamped area before I stamped the Azalea. I'm just doing the pigment ink plus the Azalea ink stamping. So you're going to see how different that is. And you can see those little white hearts in the background of the flowers. It's really, really cute. So I'm using the pressure tool to make sure that I go around really carefully around that heart shape. Just kind of put your back into that and you can see how good that looks. Now, if you want just to really firm up that heart shape and make it crisp, you can do a tiny bit of the ink blending just at the edges of the heart. So see how there's still just a little bit of white area? You can make sure that that beautiful heart shape is really crisp by just adding a tiny amount of ink. So we're not inking the whole thing, and this is going to end up having a really different look. So when I peel this off, you'll see what I mean. That shape is so crisp and perfect, just the perfect little heart. And I will rub off any excess ink so that you can see the little teeny weeny hearts in the background. It's more subtle against the white background than it is on the left where I use the ultra pink all over, but it is just as adorable and it's the perfect Valentine. So now I have the gold hero pearls. I'll do the same split the difference technique to fill this in around the edge. The gold is kind of a fun change from the white on the other card. And because there's so much more white on this card, because I'm not ink blending, you can kind of see why I didn't use the white pearls on this one, because the gold pearls just stand out so much more. Now make sure that you don't put your hand in the wet pearls. These dry really quickly, but they obviously weren't dry here, so make sure that you don't mess them up, which miraculously I did not. So here's what that looks like. Really different look, but look at the cute, subtle little hearts that you see behind the fun daisy bold print with little heart-shaped leaves. This is such a cute background stamp. But I'd really love for you to think about all of your bold print stamps this way with this technique and see what you can come up with. Here are the finished projects. Head over to the blog to see more information about this and a full list of supplies. And thanks so much for watching.